He smashed a locker so badly that the country club banned him for life. And what he did next shocked everyone in professional golf. If you've ever wondered what happens when a millionaire athlete loses control in front of the entire golfing world, you need to hear this story. Because Wyndham Clark didn't just lose his temper, he lost access to one of the most legendary golf courses in America. And the road back has been anything but easy. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what he did, why Oakmont's president called him out by name in a letter to every single member, and whether this US Open champion has actually changed, or if he's just saying the right things to get back in the door. Stick around, because the ending of this story is something even die-hard golf fans don't fully know yet. Let's go back to June 2025. The US Open. Oakmont Country Club, just outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, one of the toughest, most punishing golf courses in the world. Wyndham Clark walks in as the defending major champion Energy, a guy who had already won the US Open back in 2023 at the Los Angeles Country Club, beating Rory McIlroy by a single stroke. That win made him a star. It put him on a different level. But 2 years later, things were not going his way. Clark had been struggling. His career, after that 2023 high, had started to plateau. The expectations were piling up, the results weren't matching them, and the frustration had been building for months. And it wasn't the first time that frustration had boiled over either. Just a month before Oakmont, at the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow, Clark threw his driver in anger after a bad shot, and that club nearly hit a volunteer standing nearby. It also damaged a sign featuring one of his own sponsors. He apologized for that one publicly, saying he let his emotions get the best of him and promising to do better. But a month later, at Oakmont, after missing the cut at the US Open, meaning he didn't play well enough to make it to the weekend rounds, something snapped. Wyndham Clark went into the player locker room and destroyed his locker. Not just a small dent. We're talking real damage, the kind that gets photographed, the kind that gets leaked, the kind that becomes a story the entire golf world is suddenly talking about. A photo of that demolished locker went viral. And once it went viral, there was no controlling the narrative anymore. People who had admired Clark for his talent suddenly saw a different side of him, a guy who, when things didn't go his way, took it out on the room around him. Oakmont Country Club did not let this slide. This is one of golf's most historic clubs, and they take their reputation seriously. According to ESPN's reporting at the time, Oakmont's club president, John Lynch, sent a letter to all members explaining the situation. In that letter, Lynch said that after multiple discussions with the USGA, the United States Golf Association, the governing body of American golf, and the Oakmont board, they had made a decision: Wyndham Clark would no longer be permitted on Oakmont Country Club property. Full stop. Banned. The letter said this decision would remain in effect unless formally reconsidered and approved by the board. In other words, there was a path back, but it wasn't automatic, and it wasn't up to Clark alone. So what would it actually take for Wyndham Clark to be allowed back on Oakmont's grounds? The letter laid out very specific conditions. First, full repayment for the damages he caused. Second, a meaningful financial contribution to a charity of the Oakmont board's choosing, not Clark's choosing, theirs. And third, and this is the part that really made headlines, the successful completion of counseling and anger management sessions. Think about that for a second. A professional athlete, a major champion, being told by a private club that he needs anger management before he's welcome back. That's not a small embarrassment. That's a public statement about his character, sent directly to the membership of one of the most respected golf clubs in the country. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because Oakmont isn't just any golf course. It's scheduled to host the US Open again in 2033, and that year happens to be the final year of Clark's exemption for winning the 2023 championship. Meaning, under normal circumstances, he would have an automatic invitation to play there again in 2033. But after this ban, that future was suddenly in serious doubt. When the news broke, reporters caught up with Clark at the next tournament, the Travelers Championship, just days after the ban was announced. And his response was telling. He said, quote, he had a lot of highs and lows in his career, especially that year, some real lows, and that he made a mistake he deeply regretted. He said he was very sorry for what happened, but that he also wanted to move on, not just for himself, but for Oakmont and for the USGA, so he could focus on the rest of his season. But moving on wasn't really his call to make. The people affected by what he did at Oakmont were the ones who would decide when it was time to move on, and that's an important distinction, because it shows just how much control Clark had lost over his own story. A few days after that, at the British Open, Clark spoke again, and this time he went further. He said he felt terrible about what happened and that he was doing everything he could to try to remedy the situation. He said the obvious part, paying for the damages, was a no-brainer, that was a given. But he also talked about wanting to give back to the community because he had heard a great place near Pittsburgh, and he wanted to show them that what happened did not reflect who he really is, and that it would not happen again. He went deeper into his mindset too. He talked about how he'd been open in the past about a mental shift he made to get better as a person and as a golfer back in 2023 and 2024, the years around his major win. But then, he said, a tough year combined with all the outside expectations and built-up frustration all came together at once, and he did, in his own words, two stupid things, referring to both the driver throwing incident at the PGA Championship and the locker destruction at Oakmont. He said it woke him up. He said it pushed him back toward the person he knows he actually is and wants to be. And when asked directly if he expected to be back at Oakmont for the 2033 US Open, his answer was honest in a way that probably surprised people. He said he didn't know, that it was up to them, not him. He said he would hope so, called it a fantastic course and place, but admitted, in his own words, that he did something awful and that he was really sorry for it. He said he hoped Oakmont would have it in their hearts to forgive him, and that maybe in the future he'd be able to play there again. Now here's the part of the story that most people online have never actually heard: what happened after all the headlines faded. According to exclusive reporting from Golf Week, nearly a year later, Wyndham Clark had actually done everything that was required of him. Bob Ford, Oakmont's pro emeritus and a respected figure at the club, confirmed it directly. He said Clark had done everything that was asked of him by both the USGA and Oakmont together. The lockers were fixed. And yes, Clark paid for them himself. Ford also confirmed that Clark made a charitable contribution, with the beneficiary connected to Oakmont's caddies, and that Clark completed his anger management classes, which were done online. So the three conditions in that original letter, repayment, charity, and counseling, were all fulfilled. But here's an interesting twist. Even though all the conditions were technically met, Clark remained, in the words of that same report, persona non grata at Oakmont, meaning he was still not exactly welcomed back with open arms. There were even rumors floating around among club members that his locker hadn't been repaired yet, which Ford flatly denied, explaining that the real reason for the delay was almost darker than people realized. Some members reportedly enjoyed showing off the damaged locker to guests as a kind of trophy of the incident. So the repair was deliberately held off through the fall before finally being fixed over the winter. There's even a strange detail that shows just how much this incident became part of Oakmont's culture and inside jokes. At a member-guest tournament held at the club in late May, the club apparently created a new trophy that referenced the mesh from Clark's destroyed locker. Bob Ford joked that everyone wanted one of these trophies, but it had nothing officially to do with Wyndham Clark himself. He even said members joked that they should smash one in and send it to him. Dark humor, but it shows the incident has become permanently woven into Oakmont's identity. So where does that leave Wyndham Clark today? As of the most recent reporting, when he was asked again about his feelings, this time about a completely different historic course, Shinnecock Hills, reporters couldn't resist bringing the conversation back to Oakmont and what happened there. And Clark, while clearly trying to move forward, gave an answer that suggested he understands he doesn't get to simply close this chapter on his own terms. Forgiveness, especially from an institution like Oakmont, takes time, and it's not something you can rush, no matter how many boxes you check off a list. This entire saga raises a bigger question that goes beyond just one golfer and one golf course. What do we actually owe people after they make a public mistake? Clark paid the money. He did the charity work. He sat through the anger management classes. By every measurable standard, he did what was asked. And yet, almost a year later, he's still not fully welcomed back. Is that fair? Or is that exactly how accountability should work, slow, earned, and not guaranteed just because you check the right boxes? There's also the question of what this means for his career going forward. The 2033 US Open at Oakmont still hangs out there as a question mark. Will the board formally reconsider his ban by then? Will Clark have rebuilt enough trust over those years to be welcomed back as a past champion deserves to be? Or will this single moment of losing control in a locker room follow him for the rest of his career, showing up in every interview, every preview article, every time Oakmont comes up in conversation? What's clear is that Wyndham Clark's story is a reminder that talent alone doesn't protect your reputation. He's a major champion. He beat some of the best golfers in the world to win in 2023. But all of that can get overshadowed by a few seconds of losing your temper in the wrong place, in front of the wrong people, with a camera close enough to capture the aftermath. And there's something almost universal about this story too. even if you've never picked up a golf club in your life. Most of us have had moments where frustration built up over time, bad results, high expectations, things not going the way we planned, and we've said or done something we regretted. The difference is, most of us don't have our locker photographed and leaked to the entire world. Most of us don't get a letter sent to hundreds of members explaining exactly what we did wrong. Clark's mistake just happened on a much bigger stage, with much bigger consequences. So here's the real question to think about as you watch this story unfold over the coming years. Do you believe people can fully come back from a public failure like this? Or once that kind of moment is caught on camera and goes viral, does some part of your reputation just stay damaged forever, no matter how many apologies you give or how many anger management classes you complete? Wyndham Clark says he's a changed man. He says this won't happen again. Oakmont's Pro Emeritus says he's done everything that was asked of him. But the club still hasn't fully welcomed him back, and the road to that 2033 US Open exemption is still uncertain. This story isn't over. And if Wyndham Clark steps onto Oakmont's grounds again as a fully welcomed guest, you can bet it'll be one of the biggest redemption headlines in golf. Until then, all we can do is watch and wait, and decide for ourselves whether actions really do speak louder than a smashed-up locker. If you found this story interesting, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more happening in the world of golf right now that mainstream channels aren't covering in this kind of detail. Drop a comment below. Do you think Wyndham Clark deserves to be fully forgiven, or do you think Oakmont is right to hold back? Let's talk about it down there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Wyndham Clark says he's a changed man. He says this won't happen again. Oakmont's Pro Emeritus says he's done everything that was asked of him. But the club still hasn't fully welcomed him back, and the road to that 2033 US Open exemption is still uncertain. This story isn't over. And if Wyndham Clark steps onto Oakmont's grounds again as a fully welcomed guest, you can bet it'll be one of the biggest redemption headlines in golf. Until then, all we can do is watch and wait, and decide for ourselves whether actions really do speak louder than a smashed-up locker. If you found this story interesting, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more happening in the world of golf right now that mainstream channels aren't covering in this kind of detail. Drop a comment below. Do you think Wyndham Clark deserves to be fully forgiven, or do you think Oakmont is right to hold back? Let's talk about it down there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.